All right, well, the election is almost here. It's on Tuesday. People are already voting, but you're always worried about what could happen, particularly in the world of cybersecurity. And cybersecurity companies around the country deal with increased disruptions, particularly those that are aimed at the democratic process. And there are surely a lot of them. Well, how many? I mean, what does it mean? Let's ask our next guest. Dr. Chris Pierson's with us, CEO at Black Cloak. I would have to imagine, and you can quantify it for us, I mean, there must be so many more typical types of attacks to try and really tamper with our democratic process here at home. Is that right?
It is. It's actually really interesting this election season because we are seeing impacts like no other, right? Really, really diverse and escalating threats on cybersecurity and the cyber landscape. And it's interesting because it falls into like really two different buckets. One, pre-election threats, pre-election risks, but also those post-election risks because of the role of deepfakes and AI. They're playing a much bigger role now. So cybersecurity companies are not just being charged with protecting critical infrastructure, protecting against disruption. They are now having to go ahead and host and really solve a whole host of items and risks that are out there.
Let me ask you this, because you said pre and post. So pre seems really obvious to me, right? You want to, maybe you're a this fan or a that fan for one of the sides on the ticket. And so you sort of tamper with everything and make your candidate win because you love them and it serves your purposes. Post-election, what does that matter? What are we talking about? Maybe seeing the plans of the future president may have in place, break in to see the plans? I mean, what's the post-election threat?
So in terms of post-election threats, they're really going to be ones that are focused on kind of three different areas: people, infrastructure, and confidence. So on the people side, there are different types of attacks here that can be levied against, right? Election workers, poll workers, and all the rest, even after the election, and releasing information on different candidates that were part of the election. On the infrastructure side, we think that there can be different types of threats there that may impact or may affect the counting of the different ballots, the registration of those different ballots, and really bring confusion to the process. And then really the final one, which is most important, is disrupting the confidence. So for example, right now, the ability for a nation state, a cyber criminal, or some rogue entity to introduce into the system deepfake videos, deepfake voice chats, voice calls that actually show perhaps polling locations that are on fire, showing polling ballots that are on fire, ripped up ballots. People meddling with ballots or the election process could sow discontent, could sow a lack of confidence in an open and free election and fair election, and cause problems, cause lawsuits and all the rest. So that post-election interruption is going to be big, and it can be propagated electronically. The disinformation or misinformation here, and the ability of it to be created en masse in large scale and reach a multitude of people is really what we are talking about.
So at this point, where are these threats coming from? Are they from, I mean, if you put them in order, because you were saying this one, that one, or a rogue threat, I mean, is it particularly other countries? Are we talking Russia and China, Iran? What are we talking about when it comes to countries? What would be the order there? And what other, threats are we facing sort of en masse?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing nation state activity pick up like no other right now. And that's going to be the usual four. It's going to be Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and it's going to be them and also their intelligence agencies, right, that are really behind things there. Once again, to sow misinformation or disinformation. The most interesting thing, though, is that there are a lot of quote unquote privateers or rogue agents, so to speak, that can get involved and are getting involved because the barriers to create deepfake AI video or audio is so low. And so we're seeing a lot of that on the disinformation, misinformation side. There also is something that we haven't seen yet, which could be attacks on critical infrastructure. If you impact energy or transportation or telecommunications in key areas, you don't have to disrupt it for the entire United States. But the key areas that we've been looking at, that we've been hearing about for the past few months, you could actually impact the number of votes that could be registered that day because people don't know what location to go to, don't have the ability to get there in time, you have create grid lock on highways or impact the energy grid and they go down and are unsafe locations by which polling can take place. So there is the ability to, with really, really pinpoint precision, to be able to attack certain key areas of the US, critical infrastructure-wise, and impact this election.
That's really interesting. So it's just sort of doing things in a backwards way, right? So if they say that the grid is down, there's no electricity, or they can't, you can't go into the building, or the transportation, like the buses and trains aren't working, and it's all messed up, the schedules are messed up, you can't get there to vote, things like that. Very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. When you think about the cybersecurity players, which ones are the leaders for 2025 in your mind? I mean, I know there's sizes and types of cybersecurities, but there's always the leaders, the ones with the moats and the best of the best. Which ones are the best of the best for 2025?
Well, you have a lot of them up there on your screen. I mean, when we think about it, EDR, endpoint detection and response, reigns supreme. You have the two different folks there, Crowdstrike as well as SentinelOne, that are fan favorites, doing an amazing job fighting cyber criminals, as well as kind of on the network side, right? You have the Palo Alto Networks there. And then really interesting is in terms of what is actually transacting on the network in secure zero trust environments. And of course, Zscaler really leads the pack there. That's really what is super interesting. We do also have those folks that are interested and involved in what's called federated identity. How do you actually confirm the identity of your employees, your individuals? And Okta, quite honestly, leads the pack there. Of course, Azure and Microsoft, because of their ownership of the systems, is a clear contender there as well. But that's really what we're thinking about and really where we're looking in 2025.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For identity, you said Azure, Microsoft. What was the other one?
Okta, OKTA.
Oh, Okta, OKTA. Yeah, Okta. I just didn't hear it. Because it's true, because they're all in different sort of areas and crowds. So network, you liked Palo Alto. For CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, what's their forte?
Well, their forte is going to be endpoint detection and response. The simple way to think about this is antivirus for corporate entities, large organizations. What we had seen back in July was, of course, a bad patch, a bad update being pushed by CrowdStrike, which kind of neutered, half the computers around the world. But CrowdStrike and SentinelOne compete head-to-head in that space, and that is an absolute must-have on every single corporate device here.
And can you say something like, cyber attacks are up 50% year over year and are expected to grow 100% in the next, you have something like that?
I would tell you this, cybercrime is the only recession-proof industry that is out there. It just keeps on growing 2, 3, 5x year over year. Last year, we had $12.5 billion worth of fraud losses in the United States that were reported. The prior year, it was 10 billion losses that were reported. But everything keeps on going up and to the right for the cyber criminals in terms of the number of attacks and the amount of data they're taking. Just from August, National Public Data Breach, the NPD data breach, had something like 200 million persons' information and records, social security numbers, that was stolen. So we keep on seeing bigger and bigger attacks each and every year.
Thank you. Dr. Chris Pierson, CEO at Black Cloak.